and we'll give it a few for our audience to enter. Right now, we're up to 160 audience members. So good evening, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you to the third of 4 town hall meetings. The next town hall meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, August 19th at 6 p.m., and will focus on the concerns of our high school parents. Both high school principals will be in attendance. At a special meeting of the Board of Education, the school calendar was revised to reflect the first day of school for students as Tuesday, September 8th. The updated calendar was sent out via email reflecting this change. The format of tonight's meeting includes brief statements from our panelists on reopening items under their supervision. After, members of the Board of Education will ask questions that I or one of our panelists will answer. We ask you, our attendees, to post your questions using the Q&A feature in this webinar. We will answer as many questions as we can from the Q&A section. If you post a question and it is not answered here tonight, it is not because we are being selective. Your question may have already been answered either here or on the frequently answered questions document that can be found at www.emufsd.us. Click on District and scroll down to the questions or District Reopening Plan. To help us answer as many questions as possible, please refrain from making multiple question entries in the Q&A section. In other words, one question for every entry. It's easier for our readers to read and ask the question. Our meeting tonight will end at 7:30 p.m. I would like to introduce our panelists for tonight's town hall. From the Board of Education, we have Mr. Melnick, our board president, Mrs. Baruch, our board vice president, and trustees, Drs. Eckers and Luce, Mrs. Tell, Mrs. Napolitano, and Mrs. Benowitz. Central office administration includes Drs. Pizzo and Dr. Casamento, Mr. Russo, Ms. Presenda, Ms. Detour, Ms. Dobies, and Mrs. Gelfer. And our district physician, Dr. Zazo. And with us tonight are our wonderful middle school principals, Mrs. Breslin and Mr. Lethbridge. To start us off, I'd like to introduce our Board of Education Vice President, Mrs. Elisa Baruch, to give a few opening remarks.
Thank you all for joining us today as we prepare to answer your questions that pertain to the reopening of middle schools. The Board of Ed is made up of 7 parents with 17 children between us. 5 of those children are in middle school. So Mrs. Benowitz, Mrs. Tell, and I truly do understand what you are going through as you prepare for the coming year. I ask that you are patient with the district as we continue to evaluate the ever-changing situation and provide the best possible educational year to all 7,200 of our students. I'm confident that our wonderful teachers will make sure that the needs of the students are met. Though sure to be trying, I imagine that the 2020-21 year will be one to remember. As always, please feel free to email the Board of Education at boe@emufsd.us. We truly can't wait to see our students in the building once again in just 3 weeks' time. Thank you.
Very good. And Mr. Melnick has a few words to say. Thank you very much, Mrs. Baruch.
Thank you, Ms. Baruch, and I couldn't have said it better myself, and I don't want to take up too much time because I want to get to as many questions as we can tonight. I just ask that you be patient with us. Know that we're doing everything we can to get your children the best education possible this year. It's not going to be easy, and a lot of it is going to be see what happens and move forward. And we'll see what works and what doesn't work. And we'll, as we've done with this plan since the beginning, we'll continue to change it to make sure that it's in the best possible way to educate our children in East Meadow. And I just want to thank all of you for attending tonight and continuing to be supportive and helpful as we go through this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Zazo, a few words?
There we go. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, and thank you to the school board and all administration for putting together a very comprehensive plan. And as I said in the past, the school district needs to be nimble and flexible with what we do with the students. My basic responsibility is all things medical as far as it pertains to the medical safety and issues that may come up with the children and staff in the school. So I look forward to any questions you may have.
Very good, thank you. And Ms. Fresenda, transportation.
Good evening, everyone. So just to give a quick overview of transportation, the East Meadow School District uses contract transportation, which means that we do not own our own buses. We've been working with all of our contractors to ensure that they're following the procedures and protocols that we've put in place. As far as the sanitizing of the buses, wiping down all of the high touch areas to ensure that they're in compliance with what the district has required. As far as our students go, we would like for their temperatures to be taken before. The students should be wearing a mask on the bus, and we will seat them two to a seat. However, ideally, we would like to have them one to a seat, but it just cannot fiscally be done because we would have to double our transportation budget in order to do that. In the morning, the buses will be loaded from the rear to the front to avoid any additional contact. On the buses, the vents will be opened, which are on top, or the windows, obviously, while the weather is as good as it can be. However, they can continue to keep those windows open during the inclement months. Our drivers and attendants are going to be required to do a self-survey, which is similar to what our students and staff will be doing, and I'm sure Mr. Russo will touch on that as well. Additional information regarding our students and our drivers can be found on slides 20 and 21 of the district reopening plan.
Thank you. Ms. Dobies, special education.
Good evening. Yes, I'm Patrice Dobies. I'm the Director of Special Education in PPS. Please know in the re-entry plan, we've worked very hard in terms of speaking to our teachers, our parents, fellow administrators in terms of opening the plan for our special ed students to return to school. One of the things that we had learned the last few months is that special ed services, whether it's speech or counseling or resource room, needs to be a priority in the student schedule. And I know the building teams are working very hard to make that happen. One of the things is that, yes, students who attend special class program, and that would be students at the Clark Middle School, will be attending full-time. The other thing is we know middle schoolers, and we know out of all our ages in terms of the middle school years can be socially and emotionally fragile for all students. We know that. We know that this time they may come in much more sensitive than they had been in the past. We have our social workers, our psychologists, and our guidance counselors who are trained in trauma-informed therapies to help all our students return to school happily. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Russo?
Thank you, Dr. Card. Good evening. My name is Anthony Russo. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Personnel Administration. And the areas within the reopening plan that I will be focusing on primarily are the screening of individuals as they come into the buildings, as well as the working with the district response to students or staff members who may be symptomatic or test positive for COVID-19. And I would be working closely with Dr. Zazo in those cases. So when it comes to the reopening plan, and specifically when it comes to the screening protocol, it's really a two-step process. The first step would be a self-screening survey that has to be completed by any individual coming into the building at any point in time. So primarily when it comes to staff and students, the expectation is that that screening would happen before people come into the buildings. So the screening document itself has 4 questions, and essentially it asks if anyone has symptoms related to COVID-19, and those symptoms we update periodically from the CDC guidance. Also, did an individual test positive for COVID-19, and also if they came in close contact with anyone who's positive for COVID-19. In addition, we also ask if anyone's traveled to any of the states relative to the New York State travel advisory. So what happens is an individual would either answer yes or no to that question. If they answer yes, then what would happen is we automatically get an email and we would be alerted that that's somebody we have to follow up with. If an individual answers no, then they would be cleared to come into the building. So once somebody comes into the building, the next step in the process would be temperature scanners that we will have throughout the building. And then at that point, based upon the temperature scan, we would be able to determine if someone has a fever that's over 100 degrees or under 100 degrees. If their fever is over 100 degrees, then we would have, the person would be asked to step to the side, and we would be checking that person's temperature with a manual temperature scanner. And at that point, if we determine that the person still has an elevated fever, then that individual would go down to the nurse's office where we would have essentially an isolation room. So really, when it comes to coming into the building, we have a 2-step process. The first step is a self-screening, and the second step would be the temperature scanners. So essentially, those are the components of the plan that can speak to this evening and answer any questions regarding those items.
Thank you, Mr. Russo. Mrs. Gelfer.
Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Card. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kelly Gelfer. I'm the Director of Music and Art. We are currently working to ensure that we will be providing a safe and comprehensive program in both music and art to our students, while remaining in alignment with all required safety procedures recommended by the New York State Education Department. Thank you for your continued support for art and music, and we look forward to getting back to making music and creating art. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Pizzo?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Card. In my area, we help complete the purchase of equipment and supplies to address concerns related to the COVID-19 virus. Some equipment related to our layered response plan are desk guards, which is listed on slide 9 of our PowerPoint presentation, temperature checking scanning devices, which is on slide 12, and sanitizing and disinfecting supplies, which are reviewed on slide 15. All of our protocols are based on New York State guidance, utilizing products as directed by the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, off an approved list of products for issues related to COVID-19, which is provided by the Environmental Protection Agency. All of the products need to be on this list. Any kind of other approach would be inappropriate. So our protocol matches the best recommendations that are out there, as well it should be.
Thank you. Ms. Detour?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. We've been collaborating with the PE teachers in the elementary level the middle school level, on the wrong town hall, on the middle school level to create a program that adheres to the New York State education regulations and requirements, but at the same time, one of the questions we got the other night from one of the students was, is it going to be fun? And yes, that's what we're trying to do. We want to make a physical education environment that keeps you smiling, keeps you moving, and you can really, truly enjoy. So that is our goal, and we are hoping that that's the direction we headed.
Very good. Thank you. Dr. Casamento?
Thank you, Dr. Card. Good evening. So my role in this whole process was to work with groups of people to develop the scheduling, the SEL, the technology, special education, and the ENL, part components of the plan. So anything that touches curriculum, schedules, has been done not by me solely. I had groups of great people, almost everybody here, working with us. It was administrators, it was teachers, it was parents. I had a focus group of students. So all of these things were brought together to develop the components that I worked on in the reopening plan.
And now to introduce the people who you will be closely aligned with and come in contact with, who will answer the day-to-day questions as they relate to the buildings. I first present to you Mrs. Breslin, our W.T. Clark Middle School principal.
Hi, thank you. I'm Stacy Breslin, as Dr. Card said, Clark Middle School principal, and we've been working diligently on a plan to reopen the middle school safely and to offer a comprehensive program that focuses on both the academics and the social and emotional goals of the students. I'm happy to answer any questions this evening, and if I don't have an answer right now, I will certainly work to get that answer for you and get back to you.
Thank you. And Mr. Lethbridge?
Thank you, Dr. Card. Good evening, everyone. Kind of echoing what Mrs. Breslin said, where our goal is to provide a safe, nurturing, healthy learning environment for our students. We're trying to make the middle school as much as a middle school as we can under these circumstances. We know it's a difficult time to be a middle school student anyways without the COVID, but now on top of that, we add an extra layer. But I believe our staffs are ready for that challenge. I want the children to know we're here for them. I also want the parents to know that we're here for them, and to please be patient and flexible, and don't be afraid to call us and ask us questions, because like Ms. Breslin said, we might not have the answer right away, but we will get back to you because we're all in this together.
Thank you, Mr. Lethbridge. And now at this time, Mrs. Baruch and Mrs. Benowitz will be presenting us with questions that you, our audience, want answered. So without further ado, I'll start with Mrs. Benowitz.
You're muted.
I'm unmuted. That's usually not my problem, muting me. Hello, where will the students wait in the morning before first period?
Very good. I'll pitch that to one of our middle school principals.
Okay, so I'll start at Clark. We are going to have tape and little spots along every single entrance. There will be 4 entrances and exits where the children will come in the morning and then be dismissed from in the afternoon, and they will be socially distanced.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Lethbridge, you want to add to that?
Similar at Woodland, we'll have 4 entrances as well. And from the exits, obviously it's going to be a little different in the afternoon because there's multiple exits, but the entrances will be 4. 3 will be in the front of the building, the bus ramp, the B lobby, the main lobby, and then we also have our entrance by the gymnasium in the back parking lot by the football field. In my letter, they'll be going out to the parents in the next week or so. It'll be indicating which group of students should be lining up at those particular entrance areas.
Thank you. Mrs. Baruch?
There are quite a few questions all touching on the same thing, so I'm going to consolidate them. It's talking about the fact that middle school students are going to be switching classes, why they can't be kept in the same class, and how are we going to sanitize the desks in between classes?
Right. I'll speak first about kids moving around the buildings. If Mr. Lethbridge or Ms. Breslin would like to jump in, we can do that. We've had extensive conversations about trying to cohort kids in the middle school. While that would be the ideal, it's a challenge, and I think Mrs. Breslin and both Mr. Lethbridge have worked on cohorting and keeping our 6th graders isolated. Some of our concerns regarding having teachers travel to students has to do with supervision of students being left alone in classrooms, etc. As I said, I'll leave that to Mr. Lethbridge and Ms. Breslin if they want to jump in on that. But before we get to that, I'd like Dr. Pizzo to talk about the protocol for cleaning and how we'll go about sanitizing the building.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Card. In general, throughout the day, all high-touch areas are going to be addressed by the custodial staff. But the deep cleaning will be done every evening. And some of the things we do in regards to deep cleaning is sanitizing, then also disinfecting all surfaces. You might see on some of the commercials, you see those little devices that break up small particles of disinfectant and put it into the air to be able to coat all surfaces. We do have a couple of different versions of those devices that we do have available to us. And that is a big part of our protocol. And again, we vet out all of these products in line with the guidance as to what's appropriate. Everything has to have the appropriate kill claims, and the process has to be followed correctly, that you're sanitizing first and then disinfecting. So you're both removing and then killing any germs that remain.
And more specifically, going to the question of cleaning between classes, we've tossed this back and forth. We do not have the manpower to do that, so our focus will be on sanitizing touch points, making sure that kids from day one are trained on hygiene protocols in terms of washing their hands, making sure that we have hand sanitizers and cleaning wipes throughout the building and available for students and staff at all times in the building. Mrs. Breslin or Mr. Lethbridge, would you guys like to add to that?
Just simply that in 7th and 8th grade, it becomes a little bit more complicated to schedule in a cohort like that based upon the various language the kids are taking. Some of them have Regents classes and labs, so that's one of the reasons we were unable to do so. But in the 6th grade, they are cohorted.
Right. And I think they're housed and they're grouped in a way where if we needed to do contact tracing, we have a cluster of students who we could always track back to who they've come in contact with, correct?
Yes, and the thing about the 7th and 8th grade classrooms, especially at Woodland, all the 7th and 8th grade classrooms are used all 9 periods of the day. So you would not be able to keep a class in a room all day long. In addition to that, meeting the safety guidelines that the State Department of Health has got on, that limits us too, because we only can fit so many students in a classroom. Thus, the use of all the classrooms, it's 100%.
Very good. Mrs. Benowitz?
Yes, there's a question about lunch options, if the students will be eating in the cafeteria or in a classroom, and how that'll go, what that will look like.
First, I'll start with Dr. Pizzo to talk about the lunch services and breakfast services that will be provided at the middle school.
Yes, we will have breakfast and lunch available, and I think that this will vary throughout the district in regards to the way the distribution is conducted. So for any students that are able to pick up in the lunchroom, then we would be able to very quickly be able to shift towards a hot lunch. Initially, we are planning on not having hot lunch so that we could make sure that temperatures are maintained, and we could get our program down in regards to distributing, whether it's multiple lines, whether there's a delivery component. So cold lunch would be initially the best way to go, just because of the concerns about maintaining temperature. But we do see in the middle school transitioning to a hot lunch pretty shortly after we get started.
Very good. And where will the students be eating lunch, either Mr. Lethbridge or Mrs. Breslin?
Well, at Clark Middle School, where for the 6th graders, as mentioned, they will be eating in the classrooms. And we're using both classrooms and the cafeteria for 7th and 8th graders. Those that are in the cafeteria, they're more than 6 feet apart, and they're sitting at student desks. So there's no more than maybe 50 students in the cafeteria, although it can carry many more than that.
Thank you.
At Woodland, all grades 6, 7, 8 will be eaten in the cafeterias. However, when some of the lunch periods have significant numbers, we'll be using the auditorium and the little theater as additional rooms to be eating to allow the students to eat lunch.
Thank you. Mrs. Baruch?
As it pertains to lockers, since students will not be having lockers this year, there are a couple of different questions. One, what will happen to their instruments when they're not in the music room? And number two, what about things like valuables that will be in their backpacks that they carry with them during periods like gym where they won't have the backpacks with them?
Okay, so we'll go to Ms. Detour to talk about gyms and lockers and backpacks.
Yeah, currently for the physical education classes, we are going to be going outside, weather permitting. And with that, it depends on the activity. We are setting up spacing for students to be 12 feet apart. And if that's the case, the student can put their bag within their circumference of 12 feet. If we aren't going to have that, and there's going to be a different activity where they're rotating and they're going to be going with that teacher, there will be assigned areas that make sure the students' bags are at least 6 feet apart so that the students don't end up touching each other's bags or being too close to each other when we have our masks off, because outside we are permitted to keep our masks off as long as we keep the 6 to 12 foot distance.
Very good. And so, Mr. Lethbridge, Mrs. Breslin, I'm sure some of the concerns that parents have is the possibility of kids walking around with heavy backpacks. So what are some of the things that we're doing to mitigate that in terms of lightening the load, if you will? And what will we do as the weather changes and students are required to, or not required, students start coming to school with a coat?
Well, the first thing that we did was minimize the supplies that are necessary. So that will certainly help with a backpack. We hope that they travel lightly and bring only the items that they need. So we worked on that, and I did send that out, I believe, yesterday. As far as an instrument, I think that Ms. Gelfer wanted to mention how they'll be working the storage of the instruments.
Very good.
Just to clarify, I'm sorry, will somebody be watching the bags if the gym is rotating around? You said they'll be kept 6 feet apart. The concern is about theft.
Right.
Yeah, the bags will come outside with them. So there will be still supervision and we'll be able to still see the bags. If we're inside, then they'll be lined up 6 feet apart within either with the student or be put against the wall. But at no point are we putting them out of sight where no one will be able to see, and the students will be with the teachers.
Thank you.
Very good. Mrs. Gelfer, instruments?
So in both Clark Middle School and Woodland Middle School, there are areas for instrument lockers. Our students will be coming in at half capacity, so those areas will be used at half capacity. In addition, we are working to ensure that those lockers that are assigned are socially distant, so 6 feet apart. In the cases where that is not possible, alternate rooms will be available for any overflow instruments.
Thank you.
And then finally, Dr. Card, as far as a coat goes, for us, it's really going to be a matter of picking it up, bringing it with you, and placing it on the back of your chair. I don't see any other way right now to work.
Very good, thanks. And Mr. Lethbridge, do you want to add anything?
No, it's pretty much in agreement with what, because Mrs. Breslin and I, we work very closely together on a lot of these things because we're kind of like tied at the hip in getting it done. And it's the best we could come up with.
Thank you. Mrs. Benowitz.
Hi, there's a group question. One of them was a virtual orientation for 6th graders. Will there be one? And will there be a homeroom, and what will it look like?
I'll leave that to the principals. Orientation, homeroom.
So as far as orientation, we had sent out a video back in, I think, June. That was to be our orientation. So I'm happy to send that link again out to everybody. And then in addition to that, our plan is within the first couple of days to meet with the 6th grade students in small groups, probably outside.
Very good. Before we jump in, I'm gonna take a liberty. I see this question coming up over and over. Something about special needs classes and students attending 5 days full-time. Does A and B day cohort apply to them, Ms. Dobies?
I don't know. I
So
know they'll be attending 5 days. I don't know if they'll be assigned to a cohort or not.
they're not, because they're there 5 days a week, right? So the cohort only applies to those kids who are coming in on Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday. Students in special classes, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Dobies, they're there 5 days a week, so they're not in group A, B, or C, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Mrs. Baruch.
With the children only being in school either 2 or 3 days a week, will they still be pulled out of class for musical lessons, thus missing some important class time?
Mrs. Gelfer.
So small ensembles are going to remain within the school day as scheduled. However, rotational lessons will not be the same as they have always been. However, we are modifying that schedule. And what I mean by that is students will have small group lessons on a limited basis being pulled out of their ensemble classes. So they will not be pulled out of their classes during the day at this point.
Mrs. Benowitz. You're still muted.
Okay, I'm sorry. Group A, will they be starting the Wednesday? They start Tuesday. Will they be on Wednesday? That will be their alternate, correct? Okay, and the other question was in gym, will they be changing?
Ms. Detour.
Will they be changing? I don't, changing what? Oh, I'm sorry. They're closed. Oh, I'm like, will they be changing classes? I'm with you. Yeah, so there is no use of the locker room. Students will not be changing. We're putting together letters to be sent home and to inform the parents and the students exactly what will be expected when they come down. We're even talking about when the students come into the gymnasium, there might be assignment to one door to another, so we all don't come into one. But they are not using locker rooms, so there won't be changing. In that letter will be, please wear appropriate attire on the days of PE, and keep in mind we will be going outside.
If it's not raining or snowing.
Yes.
Mrs. Baruch.
Do all schools have the same high-efficiency venting systems that were required for shopping malls before they were allowed to reopen, and are they in all classrooms?
Dr. Pizzo.
Okay, I'm not, aware of outside of schools what's mandated, but I can say that that we have followed the guidance from SED, and SED does have some issues that they mention. I did see a question about different ionizers. That's something at this point which isn't recommended by the SED, although it is an interesting idea and is something we researched. It's not currently approved by the SED. What we do for our filtration is we've focused on using the manufacturer's recommended filters for each one of our units. If you use a filter that's too restrictive, that doesn't offer a benefit because then it decreases airflow. It also could cause air to bypass the filter, which would which again would be detrimental. So what we're trying to do is use things the way they were designed to be used, have a diligent program in regards to changing filters and making sure that our equipment is functioning properly.
Mrs. Benowitz.
How will the continuity of the education be conducted if there is a positive in the test in a classroom? So if there's a positive test in a classroom and the children have to quarantine, how will the continuity continue?
Okay, I'll let Dr. Casamento speak to that.
Yeah, so at that point, the whole class would go to a virtual learning environment, to a complete remote environment. and then the students would just follow their schedules as if they were attending during the day.
Very good. And so our plan does speak to what happens if we go from a hybrid model to a remote model, either by shutting down a classroom or shutting down the entire building or shutting down the district. It will always be our intent, if that should happen, that we go immediately to a remote model. Okay, but you know, since we've asked that question about someone being positive, Dr. Zazo, could you speak to what happens if someone tests positive in a classroom? What would be the protocol that we would follow?
Sure, absolutely. Once the person has been identified, whether it be the student or the teacher, anybody who was in direct contact with that positive case would go into quarantine for 14 days. Those people do not need to be tested necessarily unless they develop symptoms, and then they would see their healthcare provider. It goes by, then everybody could return back to the in-person model.
Very good, thank you. Up is Mrs. Baruch.
This is a question from a student. I am a student. I would like to know how fall sports going to look if there is a season.
Ms. Detour.
Okay, yeah. Presently, it's been postponed to September 21st, and we will be under the guidance of BOCES Section 8 and the New York State High School Athletic Association to interpret what the rules will be and what we are permitted to do and follow. And if we're permitted to start practicing at September 21st and what that looks like. Unfortunately, right now, I don't have a good answer for what it will look like because we don't know what the parameters will be at this time. But we're set for September 21st as long as we get the thumbs up.
Very good. Mrs. Benowitz?
Yes, there's a question. Is there any chance that the start date will be pushed back again if the district doesn't feel 100% prepared to open?
You know, one of the, in the first part of our reopening plan, it speaks to our guiding principles, and I'd like to encapsulate those guiding principles into 4 words: safety, teaching and learning, and flexibility. So I think that question relates to flexibility, right? One of the things that we've discovered since March is that every day brings us some new challenges and new opportunities. So I think many of you said this in your opening statements, that we need to be nimble, that was Dr. Zazo, and flexible. Should things change, we need to be prepared to meet that new circumstance. So basically, yeah, we have to be ready to go with it as it comes to us. Make sense? Very good. Mrs. Baruch?
Will students who are in Group B be required to log on remotely on September 8th, and how will they know how to do so?
That's a good question. Go ahead, Dr. Casamento.
Yeah, that's a great question that I don't even, that's a great question. I have not even thought of that yet.
Right.
I'll be quite honest, but thank you, because we will now have to figure that one out pretty quick.
We will have to deal with that.
Unless Mr. Lethbridge or Ms. Breslin have thought of this at this point. I know I haven't.
No, I don't have that answer.
And, you know, originally our intent was to bring in Group A on the 3rd, Group B on the 4th, and that would have been an opportunity to get them ready for the experience. But of course, we've had to since change our calendar to a new start date to reflect the change, or actually to be in alignment with a change that was created through Nassau BOCES. I want to go back to Mrs. Benowitz's question, statement regarding the possibility of pushing back that start date. I've been getting a lot of that about the possibilities of pushing back that start date, and I think that conversation is generated from things that are happening in New York City. As a matter of fact, as Mr. Russo pointed out today, there was actually an article in the New York Times regarding principals and teachers urging the mayor of New York City to delay the opening of schools. It seems like that's some chatter that's going on right now outside of New York City. We haven't heard it significantly within our community, nor throughout Nassau County, but I'll be sure to apprise the board should that begin to emerge as a major conversation over the next 2.5 weeks. Mrs. Benowitz.
This is a bus question. In the morning, we're loading from the front going back. Coming home, will it be loading from first stop, or how will the bus be loaded?
Ms. Presenda?
So it's almost impossible to load by stop at the building. It would increase the time of dismissal significantly, but I will actually turn it over to the principals because they take care of dismissal in their own buildings.
Yeah, so we discussed that, and I think just trying to get everybody in order would just be dangerous, everybody being on top of one another. So instead, we just started, Mr. Lethbridge and I, having a conversation about dismissal and the possibility of first saying 6th grade is to be dismissed at this time, and then give it a few minutes, and then 7th grade, and so on, just to alleviate the density in the hallways and at the bus. That should help.
Also, remember, with the AB scheduling, we have half the normal population in our building, so it's not as crowded as it would be if we had full-fledged student enrollment. I think also too is that in the morning, the students will, when they get picked up, the students will go to the back of the bus, the first stop, and then work their way forward. This way they have less contact with the other students. It's the dismissal part, like we've been saying, it's a little more difficult in order to get everybody on in a safe way, and also to be in a timely way to get everybody out.
Very good. Mrs. Baruch?
There are some questions about hands-on classes like science, technology, home and careers. How will those classes be handled since materials can't be shared?
Dr. Dave?
Yeah, so things are gonna, those classes are gonna have to modify their lessons and their instructions. The teachers know this, and they have started working with their department chairs to figure this out. I'm meeting tomorrow with the directors and chairs, secondary chairs as well, and this will be one of the things that we're gonna be talking about, and this is what the teachers will be working on during those additional superintendent's conference days.
Thank you, Mrs. Benowitz.
Yes, a question in regards to logging into live sessions on your days that you're remote. During the day, if you can't log on during the day but complete the assignment at night, are you considered in attendance? So it's an attendance question.
So the expectation will be that students are to be in their classes during the day, and that's how the attendance will be taken and how instruction will be delivered. We do understand that there's some outlying considerations that we're thinking about right now. But for the vast majority of students, it is expected that you will be there when class is happening, as if you were in school.
Very good. And I think, Dr. Casamento, that has a lot to do with some of the feedback that you receive from not only parents, but also from students. Having a schedule to follow during the day. Also, New York State Department of Education, one of their requirements for reopening in our plan is addressing attendance as well as chronic absenteeism. It is the expectation that students will be on time every day for learning at the classroom level, both in person and remotely. Teachers will be expected to take attendance on a daily basis. Of course, there's some realities that go along with that expectation in our district, and it has to do with access to technology, both the internet and to a device, multiple households or households that have multiple students that will need to have a device. Those are things that we're currently working on, trying to ensure that our students have the necessary tools in order to meet with success throughout the school year. Mrs. Baruch,
Yes, under
Okay.
Understanding that we are at 50% capacity, the halls in the middle school during changing time are still going to be crowded. How will that be handled?
I could put, if you guys want to answer it, principals.
So we will have at Clark anyway, and Mr. LaForge can speak for Woodland, but we will have additional staff in the hallways to monitor that the children are not congregating or walking together. And we believe that that will take care of it. And while, yeah, there are still a good amount of students, I do believe that this will be easily doable with the amount that we do have coming through the halls.
And at Woodland, we're actually going to put tape in the middle of the hallways to make sure that the flow of traffic is going two different directions. And they, typical middle school students, they like to walk arm in arm together the whole hallway. It's almost like the wide load on the LIE at, you know, rush hour. But obviously that's something we can't have. So that's why we're going to be putting a tape, red tape, because school color, down the middle of our hallways to act as a guide and for the students to stay on each side of the.
Very good, thank you. Mrs. Benowitz?
Yes, I have a question regarding a student drop-off. If a child needs to be dropped off early, if they're coming with a sibling from high school in Clark's case, or they need to be dropped off early with a parent. In the past, they were allowed to wait in the lobby before class started. What will be the procedure now?
Okay, so our suggestion is that children do not come before 7:45. And again, just be reminded that we have to have our staff in place in order to take everybody's temperature.
Very good. And I think it's the same at Woodland as well, right? 7:45.
Yes.
Mrs. Baruch?
If a child is not feeling well on their day to go into school, can they attend classes remotely instead?
At this point, that is a consideration that will be done on a case-by-case basis. They'll need to contact our building principal. I'd like to make a statement about that. While it might sound like a logical step to be able to access video streaming or live instruction if someone isn't feeling well, and I'm sure that teachers would appreciate that, so too will parents. However, our concern is the abuse of that ability to do that. One of the things that we're trying to guard against is having the option of, you know, today I feel like going in, tomorrow I don't, so I'll just simply stay home and watch it on TV. No, the expectation is if you're in group A, you're showing up to school. If you're in group B and you're an in-person day, you're showing up to school. Why? Because there are things happening on those in-person days that can't happen when we're video streaming. So it's really important that kids, if they're not sick, they're showing up, and that we're just not, for convenience sake, making the decision to stay home and just watching it live on TV. As I said, if there's a case where a student is sick and physically unable to come to school, well then the school principal or guidance counselor, whatever hierarchy in the school that's designated by the building principal to contact, should be contacted and the circumstances shared so that a decision could be made as to how we shall proceed. But it's not automatic. Mrs. Benowitz?
Yes, there seems to be some questions about the mornings with the parents and the app and what they need to do. And if they forget to do it, will the child be allowed to go into class? So if we could go over that, I think that would help a little.
So, all right. So in the morning, as I said earlier, the expectation is that anybody coming into the building completes the form. So what will happen is we've been using the app for the past 2 months over at Salisbury, and what we've found is that initially there was a number of people who they forgot to fill out the form. And we found that by reminding them and, making sure we called them and emailed them, within a few days, everybody was on board for the most part. So there's a learning curve. Now, what will happen is at the middle school level, if we find, which will happen, that there are students who, for whatever reason, didn't complete the form, then the expectation is that that form will get completed either during the day. So it can be done if we will have a hard copy of the form that the student can complete, or if the student happens to have their phone, I mean, that's always a possibility as well. But for any student who doesn't complete the form, it will have to be completed that day. In addition, we will also be contacting families to let them know that the form wasn't completed, and the expectation is that it be completed moving forward. As I was saying earlier, this is really like a two-step approach. Step one is completing the app at home, so that before anybody even comes into the building, they've looked at those 4 questions and they know whether or not they fit any of that criteria. So again, if they answer yes, then an email is sent out, we're on alert, we know who we need to touch base with. If the answer is no, they can come into the buildings, it's not a problem. However, we realize not everyone's going to complete the form, especially at first. So the second layer is the temperature scanner. So the whole purpose of the temperature scanner is to make sure that if for whatever reason something isn't picked up on that self-screening form, that when somebody comes into the building, if they happen to have a fever, then we'll be able to check it, double check it with a manual temperature scanner, and then we take it from there. But no one is going to be excluded for not completing the form. We will be following up to make sure the form is completed that day, and we will be following up with families to make sure that they understand that this is something that has to be completed every day, or at least every day that the students are in the building.
Dr. Zazzo, thank you, Mr. Russo, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it for parents to complete that form? And also, what recommendations do you have in terms of giving your kid a Tylenol if they have a fever in the morning? So can you speak to that?
Absolutely. As to your first question on the scale of 1 to 10, at 10, I would say an 11 to complete that form. It is critical. It's a first step. It's easy, and it's a quick, easy screen that'll help us make the flow into school better in the morning, and then potentially isolate people that may have an issue. As far as, this is a pet peeve of mine all the time, sending your kids to school, they have a little fever in the morning when you get up, low grade. Please, if you're going to give them a Tylenol and they have fever, you're not going to school, all right? Call your doctor and let them assess your child, see what's going on. And I just go back to, COVID in children is very, very, very mild generally. And there are some sick kids out there, but for the most part, it's a very mild illness, and they may be asymptomatic. And sometimes fever is the only cue we have that they have something going on. We don't want to start an epidemic. I just had our Board of Health meeting today. The good news is that in Nassau County, despite everything, we're only at 1% infection rate, which is almost non-existent, which is excellent. But there is still disease out there, and it can be imported into the school. We don't want to shut schools down unnecessarily and disrupt the children's education. Please keep them home and get them checked out. And if it's not COVID related, they can certainly come back to school as appropriate. All right, but just in consideration for everybody else's kids, you wouldn't want your child exposed. Think about that down the line.
And before we move on, Dr. Zazzo, Mr. Russo said a kid might walk through the scanner. They walk through, they have a temperature, 101. What do we do with that kid? And does that kid come back to school the next day?
No, they have to see their physician. One, they would be isolated off the line as per the school's protocol, and either down to the nurse's office or to a side room where they could be kept out of the flow. We ask that if your child is seen to have a fever, please, when they call, be available to come and pick your child up. We don't want to leave them in school longer than they need to be, potentially exposing people. Get them to their doctor. Once your doctor, as with any other disease we've seen in the past, they have a strep throat or an ear infection, after the appropriate amount of therapy and antibiotic time, they can return to school with those illnesses. All right, but we don't expect them with a 101 today. They're coming back tomorrow. They need to be assessed, and we need a physician's note.
That was my next question. What do they need to have when they come back? A physician's note. Proof. Thank you. So the rule of thumb is don't send them in sick, because if they come in sick and we have to send them home, they will need to have that physician's note in order to return to school, correct?
Yes,
Very
that's
good.
correct.
Very good. Mrs. Benowitz, are you up? Or did I skip Mrs. Baruch?
I'm not sure.
All right, you could go.
Hi. Okay, I'll go.
All right.
There's a couple of questions about will desk shields be purchased for the middle school?
I will take that, and I won't speak for Mr. Lethbridge nor Mrs. Breslin, but when I introduced the desk shields to both, they looked at it and we had a moment, and we realized that we're dealing with middle schoolers, and in a middle school, students would be required to pull those desk shields up and take them with them because they're switching classes. The desk shields wouldn't be wiped down after each class, so the students would have to take them with them. That poses a lot of logistical questions or concerns. For example, at the end of the day, what happens to the desk shields? Are they dropped off or left in the last class? Do they need to be cleaned? Do we have the manpower to clean? So at this point, we haven't made a decision about purchasing desk shields for the secondary level. I think we want to see how it goes at the elementary level to see their durability and how well they last actually at the elementary level. So at this point, there's no intention, we have no plan to purchase desk shields for the secondary level.
There's two questions really that ask similar things. How long will they need to stay home if they don't have a doctor's note, if they don't go to the doctor and get one? And you mentioned the quarantine room in the schools. Will that room have dividers to stop children who may just be sent there because they have a fever and they end up having an ear infection versus a fever with somebody who might actually have COVID?
I'll let Dr. Zazo answer the question about how long do they have to stay home, and then we'll go to Ms. Detour and Mr. Russo about the isolation rooms, and if the principals want to pick up, they can. Go ahead, Dr. Zazo.
Okay, sure. This is a very good question, and here's the issue. If they do not have a doctor's note, at this time with this particular disease, we have to assume that they may have been exposed. So we are going to isolate them for 14 days. That's a Department of Health rule. That's not the district doing that, so I'm putting my DOH hat on now. All right, that is coming from us, okay? We can't take that chance. So what we tell everybody is get a hold of your physician, get them in. If it's not COVID, we'll certainly take that note and get them back to school as quickly as possible. We don't want these kids out longer than they need to be, but we can't take a chance and be cavalier that you don't have a note, we're gonna go, it's okay, it may be COVID. So yeah, really, please get that note.
Ms. Detour, isolation rooms, any conversations with nurses in terms of how that might work?
Yeah, the nurses will contact the person that's overseeing the isolation room, and that person will come down if the nurses deem someone possible COVID case, and they will contact the parent. The parent will know to pick up the student, and they will take the student down to that room to wait for their parent to pick them up.
And I think a part of the question has to do with, will kids be separated in a room? Mr. Lethbridge, Mrs. Breslin, will there be sufficient space in order to socially distance if there are more than one or two kids in that isolation room?
Yes, we will definitely have enough space to make sure they're together. And also, obviously, the students will be still wearing their mask, and anybody who's a staff member will be wearing a mask as well, who's overseeing that room.
Exactly. Dr. Card, I think, Dr. Zazo, I think you can follow up on that. One of the concerns is when they're in this room, if another student has it and possibly they don't have it and they're in the room. My understanding is the precaution of wearing the masks should protect them from that.
That's absolutely true. I mean, obviously we want to do social distancing in the room if possible. We keep them as far apart as possible, but with the mask on, with everybody being masked, the relative risk of transmitting this disease is, I can't say zero, but it is essentially very, very small. So yes, and that's why it's important too. We talk about when you get called, please come down as quickly as possible and pick up your child so we don't leave people in the room longer than they need to be. But those masks on both sides will definitely protect.
Very good.
Dr. Card, if I can just
Yep.
what Dr. Zazzo just mentioned about coming quickly if you are to receive that call, just to make sure that everybody goes onto the home access center and make sure that all of those numbers and the emergency numbers are updated. That would help as well.
Very good. Thank you. Mrs. Benowitz?
Yes, there's some questions, and there's one from a student also about concerns about cleaning the desks when they switch rooms. There's a lot of concern about that.
Right. I think that the only answer we could give at this time is there hasn't been any specific guidance about the switching of classes. One of the reasons why it's important that we have kids cohorted or we know who's going from what class to what class is so that we could track and contact trace. We've explored multiple options in terms of cleaning. However, trying to clean in between classes, you end up with a log jam in the hallway. The question becomes, do you clean desks or do you have kids standing out in the hallway? And we've seen the pictures from Georgia of what happens when we have multiple students in the hallway. You end up with kids coming up positive as well as teachers. So our choices are kids in the hallway or getting kids into classrooms as quickly as possible to reduce contact and making sure that we're practicing hand hygiene, we're using sanitizers, and we're using wipes. I think that is our protocol at this point, absent our ability to do a complete wipe down after every class. Just for our public sitting out there, we have, and Mr. Lethbridge or Mrs. Breslin will correct me if I'm wrong, about a 4 to 5 minute passing time in between each class. If we're not getting kids into, how many minutes, Mr. Lethbridge? 4 minutes. So we have 4 minutes with a limited staff to try to clean how many rooms at Woodland? Maybe 70?
Yeah, probably closer to 90.
Closer to 90. It's just something that is not possible. So it's about hand hygiene, making sure kids have sanitizers. I noticed on Mrs. Breslin's list that she sent out in terms of supply that kids are allowed to have hand sanitizers on them. And I think that we also are okay with wipes as well, right, Dr. Pizzo? Very good.
Yes.
Mrs. Baruch?
Can we talk about devices? People were asked to fill out a device survey to let the district know that they need a device. How quickly will they get the device and how will they be contacted to come pick it up?
Dr. Casamento?
Yes, so as I've been saying throughout this whole process, we have 3,200 devices on order that are not due to us until about December at this time. So we are prioritizing who gets the devices, and families with no device at all will be the first ones to get a device. At this time, we have also provisioned all 6th and 7th graders to get a device, unless the families indicated that their child would be allowed to bring the device to school. So that leaves us with a limited number of devices. So the priority will be for those families who have no device first. In either case, in all the cases, the 6th and 7th graders or the people who are going to be assigned devices, then those devices will be sent to the schools and the schools will distribute them either through homeroom or English class or however they best see fit.
Who's up? Mrs. Benowitz?
It's me. Yeah, I think it's me. When will the town hall recordings be up and able to be viewed?
Very good. The town hall meetings from last week and the one from yesterday should be posted by tomorrow. Since we were able to start this video without too much talk at the beginning, I hope to have this one up at least by tomorrow or the day after. One of the things that we had to do is edit the video to cut out all of that noise that people really don't need to scan through in order to get to the meat of the meeting. So tomorrow and Thursday. Good question.
Can we talk about mask requirements in the school? Are the children going to be required to wear masks throughout the entire day?
The answer to that question is yes. On page 8 and 9 in our reopening plan, it says that masks are required. While students are in the classroom, they must be wearing a mask if there is no physical barrier between them and everyone else. Even though students will be separated by 6 feet, they will still be required to wear their masks. The only time that they do not have to wear a mask is when they go to lunch in the cafeteria while they're eating, and classroom teachers will be able to provide mask breaks at their discretion as long as the students, once again, are 6 feet apart in the classroom. Dr. Zaza, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. The distance is critical, all right? And we talk about the risk of spread being more than 15 minutes less than 6 feet apart. So that's important to get those breaks. We want to make sure they maintain that distancing. As far as masks go, real quick requirements, they need to be 3-ply. You can use cloth. I mean, these things change every other second, the requirements. Basic surgical mask, not an N95, they're too restrictive, is fine. A cloth mask, as long as it's a 3-ply, is adequate. Please don't give your children the mask with the valve on it, because that bypasses every bit of protection that mask provides. It blows out the side. So any type of, and the gator masks that go down the neck are really not approved anymore by CDC. So your basic, cloth or surgical face mask is adequate.
Very good. And are there any special requirements in choral groups for the wearing of masks and distance, Mrs. Gelfer?
So yes, there are specific requirements for choral groups, as well as orchestra and band. So for orchestra students, it's 6 feet, and for band students and chorus students, it is 12 feet. We have been working diligently to make sure that we are adhering to those guidelines in both chorus and band, as well as orchestra. Chorus and band have been a challenge. However, we are lucky enough to have some great spaces here in East Meadow that we can accommodate our students safely. In terms of chorus students, they will be wearing a mask and singing at 12 feet apart in the 50% capacity in those ensembles.
Very good. I think Mrs. Baruch is up.
Yes. Can you please explain what remote instruction is going to look like for the students and how they can notify the district that they are planning to keep their children fully remote? Will there be a live stream, or will it just be teacher contact at the beginning of the period?
All right, so the remote instruction will be live streamed at the secondary level. Students can choose to stay for the entire time, or there could be students during the focus group talked about needing a little bit of time to just download from the constant screen. So 30 minutes is what's recommended that teachers try to keep it in, but of course some students will want to stay, the teachers are going to be wrapping up at that point. Yes, it will be, that means the classes will be a little bit shorter. Students will follow their 9-period schedule at the secondary level. So everything stays the same. Ms. Baruch, you asked about right. Then the last piece was about signing up for remote. And I was going to do this in my earlier introduction speech, but at this point, both Ms. Breslin and Mr. Lethbridge have sent home the opt-in to full remote instruction survey. So you should fill that out for your child, for each child in your family. And you probably, if you had students in multiple schools, you should fill out the one based on the school that they attend. We will certainly forward it if you make a mistake, but we would prefer that, like if you have a child going to Woodland and they go to Barnum also, fill out one for the Woodland and one for the Barnum. There are separate forms and each building is keeping track of their students. So that's how you do that. And please, if you already did it on the other survey, or if you've emailed Mr. Lethbridge or Ms. Breslin, do it again. We really need an accurate count. This survey needs to be done.
And if you can submit by August 21st, that would be great.
Yes.
I'm sorry, just to follow up, it's about the same topic, so I just wanted to throw it in. Will remote students be able to ask questions and respond during class?
Yeah, so as I've also said, is that this is a new way of teaching for our teachers, and it's going to look messy at first. I'm sure of this, but over time, our professionals are professionals, and they will do what they need to for their kids. East Meadow teachers have always done that and will continue to do that. I have no doubt about that. So yeah, they will be able to respond and ask questions. The trick part here is that they're going to be looking at whatever number of students are in their class that are remote on a screen, a small screen, and it may be hard for them to figure it out at first, but they'll get into a groove and they'll be able to figure it out as we go.
Very good. I'm going to take a liberty here and just address something that just came across really quick about assemblies and assemblies on mental health. So let's first deal with mental health and how we'll be addressing that. I think Ms. Dobie spoke about that a little. Could you elaborate a little about some of the things that can happen at the building level as it relates to mental health issues?
Sure. So I know a few weeks ago, Dr. Smith, the head of guidance, also sent a survey home, and that has been shared with the building principals in terms of any of your concerns that you brought up in that survey so that we can address it. I know, you know, one thing we know about middle school kids, so sometimes if they're not demonstrating to you, we may see things. We have social workers, psychologists, guidance who are highly trained in that area. We're also going to be, we've been addressing it all summer, but on September 1st, we'll be addressing it again with our staff. We also, you know, we're gonna be in consultation with parents when we see there's things that we need to talk about. We can provide school-based counseling, but we also can recommend outside resources as well for families to address. But I think one of the things that make, you know, Mr. Lethbridge kind of mentioned it before, you know, middle school students remember back, it's a very special time in your life. And so I think that everyone is keenly aware. And yes, we have our guidance counselors, social workers, our psychologists, but we also have our classroom teachers. We also have our monitors that know our students. And we're all attuned to make sure that all of us return to school as happy as possible, and understanding that the last few months have been really a traumatic experience for all of us. And it's a trauma we have all shared as a community, as a country and a world. So I think that I know that our team, including our teachers, are very aware and are able to address the needs that come to us, our student needs.
Very good. And in connection to that question, parent was also asking about assembly programs. I think in general, how likely is it that we'll be having assembly programs in September? Probably not. I don't think that we'll be having assembly programs because we're focused on social distancing. Am I right or wrong there, Mr. Lethbridge and Mrs. Breslin? Yeah.
Not in the way that we would historically. So unless it was an opportunity virtually, and we can certainly work with our PTA Arts and Ed committee to look into those opportunities.
Right. To the possibilities. Very good. I think Mrs. Baruch is up, or Mrs. Benowitz? Your turn.
I think I'm up.
Yeah.
I just have a question regarding the day. If we could go over if the students are remotely, what the day is going to look like, because there's some confusion from what it looked like in the spring. If we could just explain how it's going to look like, because there's a lot of that going on, like a lot of confusion that it's going to be different. So.
Yeah, it's going to be very different. The students in the focus group said, I need a schedule. That was without question consistent from K to 12. And so in all the levels, whether you're in the elementary, the middle, or the high, you're going to follow whatever schedule you would have followed as if you were in the building. Yes, we're reducing some of the time that students can be on the screen, just because the students also indicated they needed a break. They couldn't sit for 7 hours just looking at the screen. And for anybody who's done these meetings, you get it. We all get it. So they will follow a 9-period day at the middle school.
how are bathrooms being handled, both cleaning and stall usage?
Dr. Pizzo?
Yes, we have deep cleaning protocols for the bathrooms, which of course would be once a day. But in addition to that, during the course of the day, there will be additional rounds of deep cleaning.
And what about stall usage? How will they keep distanced?
Well,
It's more of a principal question with the way that, could I turn it over to the principals?
yep.
Will be, as always at Woodland, students will sign in with the teacher before they use the bathroom. So obviously we're going to be very cognizant of how many students are in the bathroom. So we're going to have to limit that number. And we'll be looking at the stalls and obviously the different facilities, whether it's boys or girls, and make sure we have a safe number that's going in there. We'll have to limit that.
Mrs. Benowitz?
Yes, will there be clubs?
Will there be clubs? I'll turn that over to Mrs. Breslin and Mr. Lethbridge.
There will be, we will hope to get the clubs up and running. They're going to be probably virtually at first. Normally our clubs don't officially get rolling until the first week of October. So it gives us time to get the students acclimated to the school, especially now with what we have to do. But in addition, we'll be able to promote the clubs to the students, and we'll be working with the advisors to set up meeting dates or meeting times. This way all students can still take part in the clubs if they choose to do so.
Very good. Mrs. Baruch?
Where can parents find the app that they're going to need to fill out every morning? Where will they be given instructions on how to get the app?
Mr. Russo?
So so what's happening is at this point we are we'll be doing multiple things. First thing is we'll be creating a video in terms of how the app can be accessed and how the form itself can be completed. It's very straightforward. It's very self-explanatory, but that's one thing we'll be doing. Second thing is the link as well as QR code will be shared with the principals, so that's something that will be sent home probably within the next, I would say, 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, as a district, we'll be sending out notification as well. Also, we will be having the link and the QR code on the website as well, so that if if people don't have the letter from the principal or information from the principal or from central office, it can always be accessed on the website. So we find, with the QR code, we found that most people at this point use that because it seems to be the easiest way to access the app. But if people prefer to use a computer, we'll have the link as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Benowitz?
Yes, food allergies. If their student is eating in the classroom, how will food allergies be handled?
I think that question was asked before. I think we'll follow the same protocols we've always followed in the past in terms of food allergies. At the beginning of the school year, Ms. Detour, correct me if I'm wrong, the nurses will typically notify the classroom teacher on who has what allergies, etc. If students have significant allergies, they usually have a 504 plan. Either Ms. Detour, Mr. Lethbridge, Ms. Breslin, if you'd like to jump in, please feel free to do so.
That's correct. And now that the students are at individual desks, it actually should make it a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, whenever we have students, whatever medical accommodations have to be met, we alert all the staff that they would come into contact with. So especially at lunch, the teachers will be informed that, which students do have that, and we would work with them to make sure that they're separated accordingly or distance accordingly, so everybody is safe.
Okay. Ms. Baruch?
Before COVID, when kids went home with lice, a letter was sent home. Most parents in that class were able to figure out which child had it. How is the confidentiality of children that have positive COVID tests going to be any different?
We will notify that someone in the classroom may have tested positive. Under this circumstance, it changes significantly. As Dr. Zazo pointed out, it's all about contact. If you're in a class with someone who's positive, Dr. Zazo, what happens to everyone else in the class?
If anybody who's exposed in that class directly is going to be quarantined.
Very
There's
good.
no way, I mean, we're not going to, certainly protected information. We're not going to be giving that information out. And people can postulate whatever they would like. But in this time of a pandemic, certain rules change a little bit, and we have to accommodate the safety of all.
Very good. And then the next part of that is what happens if with a kid who's sent home because they have a 100-degree temperature. One of the things that we need to do is to resist the need to speculate as to whether or not the child or adult has COVID, right? Until right, because that's what typically happens. A kid shows up to school, people see him in school, but he doesn't show up to class and is sent home, and now everyone is speculating, does he have COVID? We will notify parents when there is a positive case. We will not notify parents who is positive. We will notify parents when a classroom or a corridor or a building needs to be shut down, but we will never notify who is positive, because that would be a violation of that person's HIPAA and FERPA rights, correct?
Correct, absolutely.
Mrs. Benowitz?
I know that Clark Middle School has sent out the supply list by email, but there are a tremendous amount of questions on here regarding the supply list. So I just wanted to address that. I know that it was sent out by email by Clark. I'm assuming Woodland as well. I know it's not a question, but it is a question.
My supply list will be going out either the end of this week or beginning of next week.
Okay.
The next question is, I think, for Dr. Zazo. If a student tests positive and the whole class needs to quarantine, do the children who are quarantining out of precaution need to abstain from everything like soccer practice or tennis practice? And how will the quarantine be monitoring? Is somebody going to be monitoring the students entering the building?
Well, what happens, yeah, look, this is what we say even when kids had strep throat, let's say during the day. Let's take something mundane. They're not allowed to be back in school for any after-school functions. If they're in quarantine 14 days, and we will monitor through the Department of Health. So, it's random. It's not going to be, daily checks. But if you need to quarantine, stay home. And that's the easiest thing to do. Most of these are phone call checks and things like that. It's not that invasive. But you don't want to get involved with that because there are civil penalties and things like that. Just stay home if you have to be quarantined.
Mrs. Benowitz?
I think this question is for Dr. Casamento, but there's a few questions about if you choose 100% remote, will you be live streaming with the teachers? How will their day look if they're 100% remote?
Yep. So full remote students will be assigned an A and B group, just like every student who's doing hybrid instruction. In addition, they will have a 9-period schedule with a classroom teacher, with 9 classroom teachers at the middle school. Remember, this is important because should a family decide that they no longer wish full remote, they are comfortable sending their child back, that they will be able to just integrate with their class seamlessly. Mrs. Benowitz, was there more to that question? I'm losing my mind right now.
No, I think that was it. They just wanted to know how the day was, so you answered it.
And they'll follow the 9-period day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Can you clarify the process by which parents, what the parents have to do in order to switch on the 5-week if they want to go from full remote to hybrid or from hybrid to full remote?
Yep, at the middle level, the parents simply will let the guidance counselor know, and the guidance counselor will inform the teachers, and we'll go forward that way.
The next question is, if a student is fully remote, can they still do sports?
Christy's ready for this.
That's an interesting question. I think the answer would be yes. However, if you're fully remote, it probably has more to do with your level of comfort about being with kids in the building. So while, I don't know, Ms. Detour, your thoughts? That's an interesting question. It's an interesting question because the assumption is the reason why you're going remote is because of your level of comfort with your child being in school. Huh? I think you're frozen there, Ms. Detour.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. So, yeah, Section 8, we're waiting just to hear if there's any guidance specifically on that. There's something called the bona fide student. They have to attend a certain number of periods to be able to participate in athletics. And I believe that distance learning is under that attendance record. We believe the answer is yes, but I will get a definitive answer for the public, and I will be emailing that out when we do a update athletics email.
Very good. I just wanted to point something out. I noticed that there are some people who are using the feature raising their hands. I don't see how that's happening, but if you're raising your hand, remember we can't see you, so there's no exchange other than through the Q&A option in this program. Mrs. Benowitz?
When will Schoology info be uploaded for middle schoolers?
I'm not sure what that question refers to, but the sync between the student information system and Schoology will start going every day, I believe by the end of this week. So schedules, everything should be completely updated at that point.
Can you explain if there will be extra help and how that will happen?
There will be extra help, and U2 sessions are what teachers are required, although many East Meadow teachers give multiple sessions. So the extra help session could be held virtually if the student is virtual on that day, or it will be in person for the students who are in person. Yeah, so extra help looks like extra help. It's just going to be virtually for some students on some days.
Thank you.
Mrs. Benowitz?
It's not COVID related, but there are a lot of questions regarding the 6-day schedule. I guess there are a lot of 6th grade parents on and they don't quite understand the 6-day week. Can we help them? I'm sorry.
I'll turn that over to Mr. Lethbridge and Mrs. Breslin.
We will be sending out a calendar. I know the district is actually looking at publishing the calendar as well. So this way, whether you're A or B, whether you're day 1, day 2, day 3, it'll all be explained in the calendar. The first day, that's one of the things our 6th grade teachers do. I know at Woodland, I know at Clark as well. They go over with the students how to read that schedule. And that's something that the kids pick up. They picked up on that pretty quickly. Parents have trouble with it, but the students get it within a short period of time. But that's something that we do the first day as we orient to come into middle school.
Very good. Mrs. Baruch?
This is a great question. Can the mask that the kids are wearing have designs on them?
Absolutely. I actually have a Nike one. Swoosh.
I have the Hamilton logo.
Yes. However, let's make sure we add this part. Parents, please make sure you check those masks that they are appropriate, age appropriate. In other words, we need not see any logos for party favors, drinks, etc. Must be age appropriate. Mrs. Benowitz.
Can you tell us roughly the class size? How many students per class?
I'll leave that to
the cohort.
Yep. Ms. Go ahead.
So our classes vary, but I would say the average class is probably about 14.
Is that on A or B, or that's the full complement and then split into 7, or is it 28?
No, so I would say the average is probably about 14 on an A day and, 12 to 14 on a B day.
Very
Some
good.
classes are definitely small. And we have a couple that are bigger, and as a result, some of the teachers will have to move into those bigger rooms that can accommodate.
Yeah. Similar Woodland range could be from 12 to 15. It just comes down to the breakdown of the alphabet, the A to L and the M to Z. And then also the spacing that each classroom provides, that limits how many students we can put in there safely under the Department of Health guidelines.
Very good.
Will the students have outdoor recess, or will they be required to stay at their lunch spot for the full 40 minutes?
That's something that we're working on, but yes, we will have recess. We're just talking about what it is that the kids will be able to do at that time. So we'll have some conversations with Ms. Detour, since we're not allowed to have them share any equipment, and what that might look like. But at least to go outside, maybe, walk around a little bit and get some fresh air.
Very good. We have time for one more question from Mrs. Benowitz.
I have nothing. They're all the same. I'm sorry. Elisa, do you have anything?
I do. Just a quick clarifying question. What do you mean by quarantining class? Is it every class that they were in, or just one classroom specifically?
I think that it's about contact, as Dr. Zazo has pointed out. If someone tests positive, it's all kids who may have come in contact, close proximity with that student. Dr. Zazo, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's absolutely correct. Only the primary positive person, anybody who comes in contact with that person. We're not going back 18 generations.
Very good. And so, Dr. Zazo, let's expand that just a little bit further. So
Sure.
The positive person has a brother or sister who lives in the same household who is not positive. What happens to him or her and everyone that person has come in contact with?
Right. The way it would work is, in a family with siblings, one of the siblings becomes positive. The other siblings would be isolated because they're quarantined because they are in contact with that one sibling. And that's the way it has to be. And this way, they may be in different schools in the district and so on and so forth. We're not going to, then go further back at everybody else that they've come in contact with. The good news, and the other thing that, just to bring this up along this line, we're going to look at the Department of Health for patterns, and this is where this comes in. If we have a family, as the example you provided, where there's a positive student and the siblings in one house, so we give you 3 kids in the district, let's say, that are positive, that's not necessarily going to trigger a shutdown. What we're going to look for is that we maybe see 6, 7 kids in different areas and unrelated. That's going to be more concerning for us for a pattern. So we're looking really at pattern, not at absolute numbers. But if you have those siblings, they're out too. They're going to be quarantined for the 14 days.
Very good. And all the kids that the person who tested positive came in contact with?
That's correct.
Very good. So at this time, I'd like to ask, are there any closing remarks, first from board members?
Sure, I'll jump in just very briefly. Just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Thank you to Mrs. Benowitz and Ms. Baruch also for asking all the questions. It's really a large job aggregating everything, and I thank you for your time and your efforts. And to all the parents here tonight, we know you certainly care, and we all certainly care about your kids' education. That's why we're all here together. If your questions were not answered, certainly please continue to ask the questions through the appropriate channels, and I look forward to a successful school year, even though it's going to look different this year, and we're all in this together. So please give us patience, and thank you.
Any other trustees, comments? Any of our panelists?
Yes, a few things from here. Don't forget about the survey. The FAQ has been updated as of last Friday. It will be updated again Thursday. There's quite a few questions that are coming out of these meetings. So I'm in the process of updating them. It will either be posted again on Thursday or Friday of this week. So it was updated last Friday, and questions that were in the chat that haven't been answered are going to appear on the FAQ, and even some that have been answered. So that should be updated Thursday or Friday. And the last thing is that the school calendar is currently posted online. However, it will arrive to your homes later than normal. Because of the craziness of the year, we had multiple changes, and it just went to printer this week. So we're not anticipating it arriving to your homes until about the first week of school.
Very good. On behalf of the entire central administration, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. I'd like to thank our 2 middle school principals for being here this evening and answering questions asked by parents. I think the best way to end is to say #Stronger Together. We will get through this together. Everyone have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you soon. Take care.
Everybody.